Hi, everybody. I am here, excited to talk to you about the power of resourcefulness. And I'm coming to you fresh from a conversation I had in hiring for a personal position. So we just moved to Pennsylvania from Maryland, my family, and we are in the market for a nanny. And the nanny market here in the area that we live in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, is much different than outside of DC, where we've been for years. The childcare market itself is just a very different beast. So we have been handling working parents and just trying to figure out what the plan is for childcare. And one of the things that I love about the work that I do is that I get to design my work around being the mom that I want to be, and I get to design my childcare plan around the type of team member and business owner that I want to be. And we homeschool, so we coach parents who don't homeschool or do homeschool. It's not. I don't teach parents to decide one way or the other, but for us, that is what we do. And we help parents in all avenues and all types of educational plans. And so I'll just share a little bit about the experience I have at this point in hiring from the younger generation. So I'm not even 40 yet, elder millennial, I guess, in that respect. And what I'm hearing and seeing is in hiring more of the Gen Z type generation is a lack of resourcefulness. And I want to talk about what this looks like for parenting sensitive kids, because obviously I coach parents whose kids are a lot younger than the 22, 23, 24-year-old market that is looking for a nanny position. And of course, obviously, we're also interviewing with older, more experienced nannies who have more of a career focus. And it's also true for my position. I'm not looking for full time. So that's just been the candidates. So anyways, rather than diving into the nitty gritty of my particular hiring situation, I want to talk about what's important for us as parents to hear and see. And I'll use this example. Okay. So we've had a few interviewees that have been really looking for a position that is not what I'm expecting. And one of the recent developments in our nanny hiring position was that someone canceled last minute because their phone wasn't working and they couldn't access the directions. And as a person who grew up on MapQuest and the concept of a printer, for me, as an employer, that says to me that the potential employee can't resourcefully solve this problem by screenshotting before leaving the house with Wi-Fi the directions and then following those step-by-step directions. So when we think about raising sensitive kids, and myself obviously putting the love and care of my child in the hands of someone who can't follow directions without having the internet at their fingertips, that's a real problem, because I'm looking for someone who can be resourceful, right? Obviously, I had a conversation with this person about their problem-solving skills, and it was clear to me that they didn't have much, and so it wasn't a good fit. But what I want to do is really talk about what it takes to raise sensitive kids now, and where our sensitive children are really struggling. Because when we're talking about having our children eventually join the workforce, you need to ensure that your children know how to creatively solve their problems. 65% of the jobs that will exist for our kids by the time they're 18 don't exist right now. Obviously, the workforce is changing, and this goes beyond just right now with the economy. So I want us to really pay attention to the skill sets that people learn in childhood that impact how they show up in the world in young adulthood, right? Because Sensitive kids are actually fantastic at thinking outside the box, and they're very, very effective at being detail oriented. If they're overwhelmed, however, they will get so stuck in the details that they will actually stop their creative minds from solving their own problems. And this is where emotion regulation comes into play, right? Emotional intelligence, which is very different than intellectual intelligence. And let me know if you're saying hi in the chat. Ask questions about this topic. It is absolutely one that I love to have. We have this conversation frequently with my clients. The difference between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence, right? So common is like street smart versus book smart, right? But street smart means, can you trust your gut? Can you assess a situation? Can you clearly solve a problem by MacGyvering it, like thinking outside the box? Emotional intelligence includes street smarts because you have to slow down your heart rate when it's pounding. You have to notice whether or not you feel anxious or fearful, which are two different emotions, or if you're feeling confused or overwhelmed or all of the above, and also slow down your heart rate in those emotions, and then change the tension in your body, and then acknowledge if somebody else in the room is feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, and think outside the box by wondering how you can influence that person. All of that requires presence of mind. So when we're thinking about being able to handle a high stakes situation, like my cell phone doesn't work and I need to get to an interview, this is where Gen Zers are really getting quite stuck because they are being raised in a digital age. Now, is it wrong that the person couldn't make it to her interview with me? I'm not going to say she's morally unintelligent. I'm sure she's very effective at the position that she's been hired for. Where I'm concerned as an employer is that this person wasn't capable and able of screenshotting directions and just going for it. And that level of lack of trust in herself and lack of trust in her own personal gumption is a concern for me when I'm hiring someone who's going to help me raise my kids. So this is for those of you just jumping in. A nanny interview fell flat because she lost service and called me from her house that she can't leave her house because she doesn't have service. When from her house, she could totally pull up the directions, screenshot it, and get it to my house to meet my family and figure out if it's a good fit, right? Like that immediately was something that I called out as an option. And so for us, the concern is in raising sensitive kids, will they feel capable, able, and creative enough to move out of the, oh no, the way it usually goes isn't available to me. What do I do now? That's resiliency. That's emotional intelligence, because you need to be able to calm yourself when you have the oh no moment. And then communication skills come into play, because if you're not able to negotiate a different solution and work with someone to come up with that solution, then you end up getting stuck. So take my frustrating moment and the conversation that I just had and give yourself the opportunity to assess whether or not your kid has these skills at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because if your kid doesn't have these skills early, then they are seeding their own identity at this age as a non-problem solver. That's not a real word. Obviously, what they would be thinking of themselves is, I can't, I won't, I don't know how, therefore I must quit. If it's not going my way, then we're all going to just go the highway, right? My way or the highway mentality means that you lack resourcefulness, means that you lack creativity, means that you lack the ability to think outside the box. And these skills are critical in the workforce. I've hired and fired many, not fired as many, but I've let people go in my career, working as a supervisor in clinical world, working in running this business, running the other business that I ran, the clinical practice. So I've worked with my fair share of team members, and I've also had in-home childcare as well. And I've worked in daycare too. As parents, we hire people to help us raise our kids, right? Whether that be the public school system that you engage with your child or the daycare or whatever. The focus is in noticing that you have managed other people to help you learn to help you take care of your child. And I want you to observe those people likely are younger than you, typically, just generally. And if that's the case, what skill sets do you observe that they don't have that you want to make for dang sure your kids have? Because when we're stuck in solving problems, if we don't know how to manage our own frustration, overwhelm, or anxiety, instead what happens is we quit the conversation. Now, in a situation like this, for me, what I did was I asked the clearance specific circumstance and to offer the opportunity for this person to solve the problem. And I used that as an interview option for this person. And we see and we hear, for those of you who work in corporate, millennials bringing their parents to interviews. Gen Zers, I keep getting the generation wrong. 20-year-olds bringing their parents to interviews. Newly graduated from college, people saying that they want demanding positions where they're working from home, right? Why? Because they're not capable of managing their frustration and their overwhelm and seeing that you have to put in sweat equity into a position. I want to speak about this from a family standpoint as well. You guys know that I do what I do because my sister struggles and has been for years. And as much as I'm not going to share specifics, what I will tell you is that emotional overwhelm will lead to quitting too early. When held accountable in an employment position, if you can't handle it, you will quit, right? So thinking about it from that perspective, sensitive kids need the capacity to change the way they receive feedback in order to feel capable of taking feedback, even if it's not delivered the most effective way, and putting it into practice, right? So in terms of working with your kids so that they become hireable, and I started working when I was 12. I made toast, was paid $5 under the table, and did that for at least 1 year at a restaurant over the summer, and then was a bus girl, and then was a waitress. So worked my way up the working chain, if you will, and to not throw that restaurant under the bus for child labor laws. I will not name it, but it still exists today. I don't know that they're any better at their employee relations, but I learned a lot as a young employee. And one of the things that I learned was the power of hard work, the capacity to manage money, right? The ability to tolerate challenges. And the challenge in that situation with my sister was that she was so overwhelmed by the physical heat. The sensory intensity actually led to her to faint a few times at that job. Because it's a hot kitchen in the summer, and it's New England, and it gets hot and humid up there. So most people think, the summer is shorter for sure up in New England, but it's definitely still freaking hot. So her sensitivity, because she didn't have resiliency skills, led her to not perform well enough in the position, and she couldn't actually do it. Now, making toast at 12 for $5 a day under the table, she was probably paid a little bit more. It's 2 years later. I think they paid her more than me. But in that job, it was a very simple job. You watch the toast come out of the convection oven, like the rotating toaster, like you see in the hotels that you can get where you can press your own waffles and things like that with a complimentary breakfast. It's that kind of toaster. Okay. You watch the toast, you keep an eye on the order in your head, and you decide if they wanted butter on their toast that you butter the toast, and then you put it on the line. That's it. All I did for 3 hours a day, and I made $5, and I worked 3 days a week, and I made $15 a week at 12 years old, and I saved it. And it paid for, working summers since I was 12, paid for the first down payment of my house. So the power of hard work is something that I truly think all children need to learn early, and obviously, ideally not under the table like that. At a establishment, right? But we have lots of kids starting jobs at 12, babysitting and doing childcare. And for me, I've always employed neighbors' kids with dog walking and things like that. And when I do that, poop scooping has always been neighbors' kids. And I ask them to send me an invoice, which means they're going to work with their parents to design the invoice and write it up and keep track of it. And then I expect them to help me keep track of it and pay them on a regular cycle. So, and that's important. When we think about helping people in the neighborhood and teaching lessons to young children, this is part of the job, right? Now, I'm not hiring 12-year-olds, but it's like neighbors' friends and things like that, right? So, neighbors' kids and things like that. And so when we're doing something like that, the goal for children is and when we're teaching them to have like their first basic neighborhood, pushing the lawnmower kind of cash job, they need to be able to show up to work and do a good job and get paid, right? And when we're thinking about the capacity of sensitive kids are no different in that respect. You're raising a kid who thinks outside the box. You're raising a kid who's detail oriented. You're raising a kid who feels deeply and who can be empathetic. This is the skill set that your kid has. If you are believing that your child is inflexible and rigid and incapable and quits too early, then you're raising a kid who's stuck in a meltdown cycle. You're not raising a sensitive kid who's thriving. That is very different than raising a kid who is a sensitive kid who's meeting their fullest potential. And I want you to understand that it's tricky, right? As a parent, it is your responsibility to see your child's potential and to parent them from that place, rather than seeing your child's current weaknesses or growth edges and parenting them from that place. Because when you do that, you label them as a child who is ineffective. And children need us as parents to have faith in their capability. Case in point, we just had a client last week where I was coaching them, and they were in week 4 of our boot camp, which is an 8-week course where parents learn how to be the therapeutic change agent in their home and stop the meltdown cycle. This family stopped the meltdown cycle, and the daily meltdowns, they were happening 2 to 3 times a day. I'm not going to check my notes, but I'll just go off of memory. 2 to 3 times a day, 7-year-old losing it, knockdown, drag out meltdowns. And they had their first meltdown free week last week. And parents were still walking on eggshells. Mom was hovering, watching the siblings, wanting to save the older sibling, who was also sensitive, 9-year-old, from this dynamic, didn't want the 9-year-old to get yelled at by the 7-year-old. So she didn't feel like she could even take a shower. And, things like that, right? And we had the conversation where I said, this is the week. They're going to play by themselves and you're going to take your time. And that has to start first with your belief that they're capable. And guess what? She did it. And she just posted in our Facebook group a day or 2 ago a picture of the kids playing by themselves and no arguments all weekend. So not only did they go from 0 meltdowns for a week straight in week 3 of our work, but then also a week later having a weekend where they're playing by themselves and she's not there coaching them to keep it together. That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about eliminating the meltdown cycle. That is allowing children to collaborate with themselves and creatively solve their problem. Now, this nanny is not going to get the job because she called me and said, I can't make it tonight. Can we reschedule an hour before the interview? And I said, I can't make it tomorrow because I'm serving clients, and I can't make it the next day because I've got homeschool stuff. There's a meeting with the hybrid school that we send our kid to. So I gotta go to that as the parents only. And we need a childcare provider by Tuesday of next week. And so I was really expecting you to show up at the time today, and you're not bleeding. I didn't say this to her, but I just said, we had this time. What do you think you want to do? Because what happens if this happens to you when you're working for us? And the response was, I would presume I'd have the directions written down by heart by then in my head, so I wouldn't get lost. I can't leave my house because I'm worried I'm going to get lost. that's not acceptable when you're caring for kids, and it's not acceptable when your kid is relating to other people and they're offered an opportunity and they're expected to follow through on it and they don't, right? That's a lack of resilience. That's a lack of resourcefulness. That's a lack of capability that you need to coach your kid through. And the very first thing that you need to do is walk the walk and talk the talk. If you have standards for yourself and you're not holding yourself to these standards, you're just waiting for your own emotional shifts to be made by hoping that the life circumstances change, then your kid is not going to change. They're not. Your kid won't change if you don't change you first. And you have to make sure that you're holding yourself accountable to that. So what does that mean? That means that you're managing your own emotions. You're choosing not to yell. You're changing the way that you react, and you're changing the way that you speak about your kids in front of your kids and also to yourself with your spouse at the end of the night. And you're doing that regularly. And if those are not skills that you have, right? Those are skills. So that doesn't mean that you're broken if you're not doing it. It means you lack the skill. Then you need to put yourself in a room where you're learning those skills, because you didn't decide to have kids just to wait for them to eventually figure this out, right? You decided to have kids and you decided to raise your kids. That means that the way that you talk to your kids has to change if it's not meeting your standards. And I know, and you know, that in survival mode parenting, you shift, like you just get used to feeling exasperated and acting in an exasperated way. But I want to ensure that you are clear with me that if we were to ever work together, I am not going to tell you that the meltdown cycle and be staying stuck in it isn't your fault. I will tell you that what you've learned didn't work isn't your fault, because people are teaching a bunch of baloney out there. And that's not your fault that you followed someone else. But I will never, ever, ever put myself in a position where I let parents hear from me that you have no responsibility in this dynamic and it's all going to shake itself out and it's up to your kid to figure it out by the time they're 20. You will never hear that from me or my team. So if that's what you want to hear, if you want to hear that like everything's hunky-dory and there's sugar plums and rainbows and, you know, your kid can cancel on last minute interviews and eventually they'll find another job, great, more power to you. Peace. Go follow somebody else who shoots unicorn farts from their butt. I'm not that gal. I will tell you that, especially in this economy, like you need to learn that too, right? And at work, you're learning that your position needs to be like, you need to be in tip-top shape to keep it, right? And so if that's the case and you want your kid to have that skill set, then you need to start teaching them now. Teach them how to manage their emotions. Lead from the top. Show them how you're communicating effectively. Show them how you're not reacting impulsively. Show them how you're not hiding in fear and you're going old school to solve a problem like that. And you're surrounding yourself with people who actually follow that same directives, who stand up for themselves when things don't go well. And I'm not saying stand up like shout from the rooftops that life is awful. Like you hear me using this as an example to teach to the masses, but I'm not in suffering. I have a backup plan. I've got another, like a few interviews planned and, plan B for us in terms of childcare. So this is not a woe is me conversation. I hope you guys are clear on that. I don't speak about other people's character. That person, that I'm sure they're lovely. And the lack of resourcefulness makes them not a fit to help me raise my kids. And so that's the skill set that we're talking about, right? So, hi, Michael. Hi, Elle. Bethany here. Good to see you. I would love to have this conversation with you guys. And I want you guys to let me know in the chat. Type resourcefulness if you want more resources related to raising resilient, sensitive kids. If you are seeing that your kid is moving to immediate quit, that's a self-esteem issue. Your child doesn't feel capable, confident, so it's a self-esteem issue. It's a self-confidence issue. That doesn't change, right? That doesn't change if you don't shift how they view themselves in their home. Children learn self-esteem and self-confidence through their relationship with their parents. This is, I mean, as a trauma therapist, adults who have strong, significant trauma histories think very, very poorly of themselves. So do children who have trauma histories think very, very poorly of themselves because they don't have that that connection, right? So this was my early career as a trauma focused clinician, doing all that work, and the self-esteem for the children clients that I worked with, the child clients that I worked with, was in the tanker. Your children are not growing up in a abusive or neglectful situation, and yet they're feeling disconnected for who they are and who you are and what your influential role is. And that is your responsibility to fix. That's where I'm going to help you take the trauma-informed research and apply it to your household, and notice that if your kid doesn't feel anchored in who they are, then that feels traumatic. There's wobbliness in their identity that they feel uncertain in. And I'll just use myself as an example. There's wobbliness in the fact that I need to run a company, and I mean, I am. And I don't have a childcare plan. I mean, my mom is here this week, and we haven't solidified the plan. And that level of uncertainty is impacting my mindset. And it's also true that I have a ton of mindset skills. So I'm not taking it out on my family. I'm not making ineffective choices at work, right? Like, it's not bleeding into other avenues of my life. And a level of uncertainty and not knowing how to raise your sensitive kids so that they break out of the meltdown cycle, that's impacting you in multiple avenues of your life, because this skill set is one that is pervasive. And so I want you to invite yourself to solve the problem quickly and to take a stand for the community that you're in, to put yourself in a community where you feel capable, confident, and in control in your own household, and you feel empowered to then teach your child those very same skills. Now, if you haven't already registered for our latest training, where we teach you all about the skill sets that you probably already have but aren't using effectively, help you gain a level of empowerment in parenting sensitive kids, and you find yourself feeling stuck in wanting a true path to breaking out of the meltdown cycle, if that is what you want, I encourage you to DM us or write down in the chat freedom. So meltdown freedom, right? So type in meltdown freedom in the comments here. I will make sure that you get the access to our latest training, where you can learn all about what it takes to break out of the meltdown cycle, the mistakes most parents make in keeping the cycle going in their own household, and noticing how sensitive kids learn most effectively. All right. So that, by the way, is going to be my team. We don't have a bot managing our direct messages. So if it takes a minute, you know why. You'll have a real human answering those messages and sending the link over to you. But I certainly encourage you to go ahead and send us a direct message. I know that having this issue happen in your household can feel very embarrassing. You might even be experiencing some shame in addition to the resentment you have for not having solved this yet. So happy to have you DM us for that link if you don't want to post here in the comments on this live video. But if you're listening to this on the replay and it's being broadcasted in our show or a podcast, feel free to email us as well for the link there, mt@meganthompsoncoaching.com. So happy to have that resource get sent over to you, and you'll be able to learn more about what it takes to break out of the meltdown cycle and how to keep it that way. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to go have dinner with my family, and I wish you a wonderful Tuesday.